tonight, we're going to talk about how a plant-based diet can affect your biometrics. What are your biometrics? There must be your numbers. That's right. So it's your numbers. You have a little bit of a cheat sheet for tonight. You'll see that the first thing that we come to is blood pressure. So anytime you go to the doctor, what do? They check your blood pressure. We used to think that 120/80 was a normal blood pressure, right? And now we know that's not true. Now 115/70 is considered normal for most people. Now, the higher you go, 120/80 is now technically considered sort of the early stages of pre-hypertension, all right? And even before that, back when I was originally in school, we were taught that a normal blood pressure was 100 plus your age. Okay, things change, right? The more we learn, the more studies we do, the more information there is, we learn. So there you go for blood pressure. Now, we're going to go over what the good numbers, if you will, should be. And as we do that, as we get deeper into it, we're going to talk about how to achieve those numbers, okay? Because the thing that you do to improve your blood pressure is pretty much the same thing that you do to improve your blood sugar and your triglycerides and your weight and your other things, okay? So the next thing that you'll see there is your height and your weight. And the reason we typically get your height and your weight when we're doing biometric screening is because we want to figure out what's called a body mass index, or a BMI, all right? A body mass index is literally the ratio between your height and your weight. And it varies by age. The BMI chart for children is different than the BMI chart for adults. Generally speaking, at least in the adult population, a BMI of 18.5 to 24.9 is considered normal. That's normal. Overweight is 25 to 29.9. Obese is 30 or greater. I have a slide, sort of a slideshow, if you will, in my office. And I should have brought it tonight. I didn't think about it until right now. It shows, it's a slide of the United States. And it starts in 1985. And it's showing the rate of obesity in the United States in 1985. And it goes right up. Usually the newest version is 2 years old. We get this from the CDC. And in 1985, as they were calculating the rate of obesity in each state, there were just a handful of states that had, substantially measurable amounts of obesity. If you flip through those slides in rapid succession, and you come all the way up to the 2000s, 2000, 2005, 2006, and you keep sliding through, you'll see all of those states begin to have colors. Each color represents the percent of people in that state who are obese. It starts, I think, at 20%. So 20% obesity, and then 25% obese, 30% obese, 35% obese, 40% obese. This is obese. This isn't overweight. Those of us who have a little extra inch to pinch, okay? That's overweight. We're talking obesity, clinical obesity. It's staggering. By about 1992 or so, they had to add a completely, new category, because originally they were just looking at like 10%, and then they had to go up to 20%, and then they had to, they just keep having to add colors. So finally, this map of the United States is colored all over the place, and the rates of obesity are staggering. Well, that has a staggering impact on our healthcare system, right? It has a staggering impact on our personal health. It has a staggering impact on our economy. The amount of money that we're spending as a nation on obesity is unbelievable because it impacts everything. Your risk for heart disease, your risk for diabetes, your risk for stroke. All of these things are impacted significantly by our weight. So that's your BMI. Now, percent of body fat, that's a special test that we can do. They have ones that you hold, or they have special scales that you stand on, and that is measuring the percent of fat in your body versus lean muscle mass and other things. So I may be 100 pounds, but if 50% of my 100 pounds is fat, that's probably not a good thing, right? So your scale is important. Your scale that you step on at home and that number glares back at you, that's important for tracking trends. Okay, it helps us to track a trend. And if the trend is going up, we probably need to make some changes, right? But that number could be fine. But if the majority of that number is fat, well, that may not be so great, right? We know that muscle weighs more than fat. If I had an example of 5 pounds of muscle versus 5 pounds of fat, there's a visual difference between the volume that's involved, right? So muscle weighs more than fat. I remember when I got back from China, over there I didn't have a car. If I went somewhere, it was on my feet or on my bicycle. I forget what those bicycles were called. Flying pigeon, that's it. The bicycles over there are called flying pigeons. And I would either take my flying pigeon or my feet, and we would go traveling. Well, I came back to the United States of America weighing almost 5 pounds more than I did the day I left. I was so mad about it, just mad as a hornet, because other friends that I had known who had gone to China lost, huge amounts of weight, including my mother. She came to visit me for 2 weeks. And when she came to visit, I told her, now, Mom, you need to practice riding a bicycle. You need to practice eating with chopsticks. And she thought I was kidding. So she hits China. She doesn't know how to use chopsticks. Well, I don't, the restaurants and whatnot, they don't have silverware. She lost 20 pounds in 2 weeks. In fact, as she got home and began to regain the weight, my dad threatened to send her back to China. So your percent of body fat changes, but here I am, I'm coming back from China. I weigh 5 pounds, almost 5 pounds more than the day I left. I'm mad as a hornet about it. I was 3 dress sizes smaller. Why was that? Because I had more muscle than fat now, right? So here I've dropped 3 sizes of dresses, but I weigh 5 pounds more. I still wasn't very happy about it, but I kind of like the 3 dress sizes smaller. So that's your percent of body fat. And there is a difference between males and females, okay? And you can see the percentage there. And it does change with age in terms of what one can expect. The next thing that you'll see there is waist circumference. Now this is a biggie. Generally when we do biometric screening, most places are going to measure your waist. And frankly, that's just a little awkward. Someone's up in your face, they're practically smooching you, and they're putting their arms around you. You don't know who they are, and they're measuring your waist. So there's physical proximity, which is awkward, but they're measuring my waist. Very few of us actually feel comfortable with what that number is, right? Well, we know that that number is associated with health outcomes, okay? Oftentimes when people begin to gain weight, where do they gain it? Right here. The guys will call it the beer belly, or my dad would always call it Dunlap's disease. My belly's done lapped over my belt. So when we begin to gain weight around our middle, which is oftentimes where most people begin to gain it, particularly once we hit our 40s or so, that is most often an indication that our insulin levels are having some challenges, okay? Because as insulin levels go up, we tend to gain weight, and more often than not, we gain it around the middle. The reason that's not helpful to us, there are several reasons, one of which, the weight here in our middle is called visceral fat. Visceral fat is the most metabolically active fat in your body. Now, fat in your body serves a really good purpose. Some people want to get rid of all their fat. You know, they just want to be lean muscle machines. Well, your fat is really helpful. It helps to cushion your organs. It helps to regulate your temperature. You don't want to have no fat. That would actually be dangerous, right? We don't want to have too much fat either. And the fat here tends to be the most metabolically active in a way that's not helpful to us. Okay? The good news, however, is that for most people, when they begin to lose weight, that's one of the first places they begin to lose it. And it doesn't often take much time. My dad, when he decided finally to make some changes in his life, he changed one thing. He stopped drinking Pepsi-Cola. This man, it was actually my stepdad, he and my mom married when I was 5, and he was just great. I adored him. He would drink a Pepsi or 2 every single day, but always a Pepsi after supper. Always. It was kind of like his martini, you know? He would finish the day and finish supper and sit back and turn on the television and sip his Pepsi, and it was his special moment of the day. He stopped drinking Pepsi, and he lost 20 pounds in a fairly short period of time. What else happened? Yeah, his Dunlap's disease started to get better, right? So he lost 20 pounds, which that's a lot of weight, right? That's a lot of weight. But this guy was 6'2". You know, he was a real guy. I thought he was, you know, Superman when I was a kid. For him to lose 20 pounds was very different than for me, who's 5'2", on a really good day when my hair is poofy, right? For me to lose 20 pounds is a bigger deal than for him at 6'2". But his pant size went down. I think it was at least 2. It might have been 3 pant sizes down. Why? Because where was that 20 pounds? Where did it come from? All of it, right here. He didn't lose weight in his face. He didn't lose weight in his arms. He didn't lose weight in his butt or his legs or anywhere. It was just all right here in his tummy. 20 pounds of no more tummy. It was amazing. I'm sorry? Did he have withdrawal symptoms? If he did, he masked them very well. He was a quiet man. He didn't speak often, but when he did, you better listen, because either you were in trouble or he was going to say something really wise. It is addictive, and he was addicted. And I'm sure that he did have some withdrawal symptoms. He had smoked earlier in his life, and he had given up smoking. Most people, when they come off caffeine, they will have withdrawal symptoms. Come off coffee, come off tea, come off soda. Soda, usually a little bit less. You get more addictive or more withdrawal symptoms from coming off things like coffee and your heavily caffeinated teas than from soda, but you can. All right, so just know that if we're packing on the weight here, it's really a wake-up call. It's your body screaming to you, do something different, because if you don't, this is going to be a really big problem, okay? Now, the numbers are in the process of being tweaked. Currently, it's a woman no greater than 35 and a male no greater than 40. They're about to drop that to 33 and 36, all right? So the next thing that you'll see there is total cholesterol. Now, when you go to your doctor and they test your cholesterol, unless they order a lipid panel, which is, you know, sort of the breakdown of the good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol, you'll just get your total cholesterol number. Any good doctor in America today will tell you that your cholesterol should be less than 200, okay? And that is absolutely true, less than 200. So if your cholesterol right now is greater than 200, you need to get it below 200. That's your first goal. Get it below 200 and sustain that. It is no good to drop your cholesterol below 200, just to take a blood test and then go back to life as usual, because what's going to happen? It's just going to go right back up. Now, I'll tell you a story. I've been married now for 22 years, and when my husband married me, bless his heart, I was a carnivore. I lived a very different lifestyle then than I do now. He was a lifelong vegetarian. Like, why did he choose me? I don't know, but he did. So he is the lifelong vegetarian. I'm the lifelong meat eater. We go to get life insurance. You got to get your blood work done. My cholesterol was great. His was through the roof. I couldn't believe it. He was hopping mad about it too. And so I'm thinking, what in the world? Like, what just happened? I should be the one with the high cholesterol because I'm eating the cholesterol. Cholesterol only comes from animals. Okay? It's very important that you remember that. Cholesterol only comes from animals and animal products. Things that came out of or from an animal, you'll get cholesterol from. You do not get cholesterol from plants. Okay, fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, there's no cholesterol there. Cholesterol only comes from animals and animal products, okay? So as long as you understand that, you and me, we are animals, right? We are mammals. Therefore, we produce cholesterol, okay? There are things that we do or things that we eat which cause us to produce more cholesterol than perhaps we naturally would, okay? Very important to know that. Saturated fat, consuming saturated fat will cause you to increase the amount of cholesterol that your body naturally makes. Now, do not think that cholesterol is bad, because it's not. Cholesterol is actually very good, all right? In fact, you really couldn't live without it. It is involved with a variety of processes in your body that are important, okay? Your body makes all the cholesterol you need. You don't need to eat any extra, right? Having said that, we also don't need to live our life in such a way that our body is forced into making more cholesterol than it needs. Does that make sense? Okay, so when we eat saturated fat, it will cause our cholesterol to go up. What is saturated fat? Butter. Yeah, butter is an example of saturated fat. Suet, which most people don't eat, some people down south do, is a saturated fat. Here's one. Coconut oil is a saturated fat. Coconut oil is like the rage, right? It's a little bit less of the rage now than it was. I have some friends who were eating it by the tablespoon every day, and they could not understand why their LDL cholesterol was through the roof. Coconut oil will not raise your cholesterol the way butter will, but it will raise your LDL cholesterol. Not as much, not as to the great extent that a regular saturated fat will, but it will absolutely raise your cholesterol. So be mindful of that. Any of your fats need to be eaten sparingly. Your skin is the biggest organ that you have. We don't think of it as being an organ, do we? We really take our skin for granted, and many of us are not very nice to it, especially you fellas. And you women too, because we put all these lotions and potions and creams on our skin, not realizing that many of those lotions and potions and creams are full of chemicals. Because this is the biggest organ that you have, it absorbs things. Whatever you put on it gets absorbed into your system within 30 to 60 seconds. Okay? So, Can putting it on your skin increase your cholesterol? I don't know. I would venture to say probably not, because I don't think enough of it would get absorbed that deep into your system to make that much of a difference. But it could. I don't know. I've not seen a study, but now I'm going to go search and see if one's ever been done, because I've never been asked that question. Okay, so that's cholesterol, all right? You only get it from animal products. You're an animal. Your body will make it. The things that will make you make more than you need is saturated fat, hydrogenated fat, okay? We have less of that to worry about. This year, June 18, I think it was, pretty much a national ban went into effect. It used to be that, trans fat was everywhere. The manufacturers weren't trying to kill us. They were trying to extend the life of their product on the shelf. They were trying to extend the shelf life. So once we learned that saturated fat was bad for us, well, we stopped eating butter, but we still wanted something to spread on our toast in the morning. So we took oil, which is liquid at room temperature. We added hydrogen to it to make it solid at room temperature. It's like taking a sponge, that's a dry sponge, and putting it in water. If you put a dry sponge in a bucket of water, what happens? Yeah, it expands. It eventually absorbs all the water it can possibly absorb, right? We take it out, it even gets a little drippy because it's completely saturated with water. Well, that's what we were doing with fat. We would take liquid fat and we would saturate it with hydrogen so that it would become solid at room temperature. We call that margarine, okay? Well, by saturating that with hydrogen to make it solid at room temperature, we're creating hydrogenated fat, which is metabolized very differently in the body and creates a whole host of unhelpful things in our system, okay? So fortunately, we're quickly approaching a time when we're not going to have to worry about that as much, but you still need to check. Okay, because the labeling laws in this country sometimes drive me nuts. Manufacturers were able to say that a product had zero trans fat, as long as it had less than a certain percentage per serving. So what did they do? They decreased the serving size, right? I remember buying a can of like Pam or that sort of thing. What is Pam? It's oil, right? It's oil, or any of the other brands. The spray oil. What's in the can of oil? Oil. But when you looked on the ingredient list, 0% fat. Well, the whole thing is fat. How can you say it's 0% fat? It was related to the serving size. The serving size was I swear to you, go look at it. The serving size was 1/8 of a second. The serving size was based on time. 1/8 of a second, I'm not kidding you. So I've got my oil spray, and I'm spraying, it on. How do you measure 1/8 of a second? Like, I don't even know how you do that. But because it was below a certain amount per serving, they're able to say it has none on it, right? I had a friend who got one of these big things like from Costco or Sam's or whatever, and he actually, just for kicks and giggles, put it in his will. He willed it to someone because he's like, I'm never going to use this. If a serving size is 1/8 of a second, like I will die before I ever use this thing. So just be mindful of labeling laws and tricks. The reason I bring that up is you always, 100% of the time, want to read the ingredients. Always. If you're buying something that did not come out of your garden, all right, you need to read the ingredients, all right? So don't go by what's on the outside of the packaging. Cholesterol-free peanut butter. Yeah, duh, no kidding, right? Don't get sucked into any of the labels, any of the marketing, any of the whatever. Just go to the ingredient list. Because back in the day, the margarine would say, and this was just, last year, it would say 0% trans fat. But if you read the ingredients, it would say partially hydrogenated or fully hydrogenated, vegetable oil. Well, what is that? It's hydrogenated. That's a trans fat. But because it had less than a certain amount per serving, they're able to say 0. Now, when I went to math class as a student, 1 + 1 = 2, but not on our labeling, okay? So the way to avoid any misunderstandings or whatever is to literally read your ingredient list. Know what you're putting in your mouth because it's the fuel that you're putting in your car. We haven't learned how to transplant the whole thing yet, all right? We're transplanting hearts, we're transplanting livers, but we haven't learned how to transplant everything. We only get one shot at this, right? So put into you what you need, what's going to help you to be happy and healthy and long, right? So read the ingredient list. And if there's a word on there that you can't pronounce, you might want to put it back. We want to make sure we're eating real food, things that we know what it is. So that's cholesterol. LDL. So within the realm of cholesterol, there's LDL and there's HDL, okay? LDL, I remember it as lethal lipid, right? Lethal lipid. That's the bad stuff. That's the stuff that'll kill you, okay? Lethal lipid, LDL. Hang on, sorry. Let me back up to cholesterol. So for your cholesterol, I said any good doctor in America will tell you that your cholesterol needs to be less than 200, okay? That is true. If it is above 200, get it below 200. My husband did. I told you that we had our blood drawn, and his cholesterol was over 200. And, he was in his 20s. What I learned was that he was a cheeseaholic. He loved cheese. I hated it. He ate cheese anywhere he could put it in. Like I am with turmeric, he was with cheese. And what is cheese? It's bacteria poop. And it's basically pure cholesterol, So here I am, the lifelong meat eater, but the meat was more of the side dish or the flavoring for me. Here he is, the lifelong vegetarian with a cholesterol through the roof, but he's eating cheese like a madman. Cheese is pure cholesterol. So his cholesterol went up. He cut out cheese and his cholesterol plummeted. Absolutely plummeted. Which leads me to, if you're above 200, get it below 200 and sustain it. Your next goal is to get it below 150. Okay? Your next goal is to get it below 150 because for every point above 150 we go, there is an incremental increase in your risk for coronary artery disease and stroke, okay? For heart attack and a stroke. So if you're over 200, get it below 200. Maintain it. Once you're there, try as you can to get it below 150. And we're going to talk about how you do this in a moment. When you have eaten a meal and you've processed that kind of stuff, your numbers are going to be up. So they want it fasting to know what it is at a state of rest. So what your baseline is, not what you're getting associated with having eaten any particular meal. Because if you've eaten a really rich meal and then you go get it drawn, well, it may be through the roof simply because of what you just ate, versus that's actually what it is at rest or what your baseline. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's your cholesterol. So your LDL cholesterol, which is the lethal lipid, you want that below 100. Okay. Now the next one, the HDL, we remember that by the happy lipid. That's the good stuff. Not all cholesterol is bad. Okay. HDL is the good stuff. LDL is what gets oxidized and clogs up your arteries and causes atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, and that kind of thing, okay? HDL does the opposite. So you can think of HDL as being like a garbage truck that's driving through your vascular system, and it's picking up all the junk that's in your blood vessel, and it takes it to where it needs to be. Can you imagine what the town of Brunswick would be like if we had no garbage trucks? You know, downtown Brunswick. Well, I can tell you what it's like, because when I lived in China, there were no garbage trucks. When you're walking past a big apartment building, you better duck, because trash may come right down on your head. You need to watch where you're stepping, because trash may come, you know, maybe anywhere, all right? In some places, the smell was horrid. But that they had sweepers that would come through. They paid people to come sweep things. Anyway, the moral of the story is, if we don't have garbage trucks in our city, the city's going to get dirty and stinky real fast, right? Well, that's kind of what happens inside of our bodies. Our HDL is the garbage truck that comes and cleans up our system for us. So we want our HDL to be up. Bottom of the barrel, never want it less than 45 to 50. Would love to see it 70, 80. Now, some of that is related to how well you picked your parents, right? So I didn't pick my parents very well, apparently, because for me to get my HDL up, I have to work at it. Everything that we've talked about so far is impacted by your lifestyle, by your diet, mostly, by exercise, some. HDL is really not very much affected by your diet. It's primarily affected by your physical activity. So we could check everybody's HDL, and I could look at your number, and based on your number alone, get a really good idea of whether you're physically active or not, okay? Now, there are a few people out there, a mighty few, who chose their parents really, really well, who just by nature have a slightly higher HDL. But those people are few and far between. It's truly through moving and using your body that you increase your HDL, right? So forget about driving through the Walmart parking lot for 15 minutes trying to get the spot closest to the door, right? Park out in the back 40 and walk. If you're able to do stairs when you go into a building, use the stairs, not the elevator, okay? We're not talking about running the marathon. We're talking about just using your body. We have created so many labor-saving devices in this nation that we're killing ourselves. When I was a kid, if you wanted to change the channel on the television, you had to get off your tush and go over there and turn it. You might have to adjust the bunny ears. Well, now, you just got to exercise your thumb. Triglyceride is immediately impacted by what you just ate, okay? That's why it's really good when you go in to have your blood work drawn, your lipid panel, your cholesterol. You want that fasting, because some of these things are absolutely impacted by what you just ate or your previous meal. Triglyceride is one of them. Triglyceride is a building block of fat, and I can tell you that in general, as your blood sugar goes up, your triglyceride level goes up. As your triglyceride level goes up, so goes your blood sugar, okay? So they're kind of, like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich a bit. You want your triglyceride level to be below 100, okay? Again, that is heavily impacted by diet. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Fasting glucose, that's your blood sugar. So, generally speaking, you want your blood sugar to be below 100. If your blood sugar is currently above 100, your first goal is to get it below 100. Now, a fasting glucose level between 100 and 125, that is considered to be pre-diabetes. Okay? Pre-diabetes. That is your body screaming at you, please do something different, because if you don't, You're going to get diabetes. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You live long enough. You know, if you're hit by a Mack truck today, it doesn't matter. But other than that, you're going to get it, right? If your blood sugar is between 100 and 25, you have got to do something different. Because if you don't, you're headed for a train wreck. 126 and over is considered to be diabetes. Now, when I was coming along in school, we were taught that diabetes was primarily categorized two ways: adult onset diabetes and children's diabetes, right? Well, we had to change that to type 1 and type 2 because children were getting adult onset diabetes. Why? So type 1 diabetes, which historically was found only in children, tends to be more of an autoimmune issue. And that's a whole different conversation in terms of what the research is currently looking at that is causing a lot of that. But just know that that is a complete malfunction of the pancreas. Adult onset diabetes, or what we call type 2 diabetes, tends to be more lifestyle related. Okay? When we eat food, digestion begins here. Many people think that digestion begins in the stomach. It doesn't. It actually begins right here in our mouth. Okay? As we begin to masticate or chew our food or drink our liquid calories, things get absorbed into our bloodstream right here. So if you're drinking liquid calories, juice, soda, you know, any of that kind of stuff, a lot of that sugar gets absorbed right here. As we begin to metabolize our food and to digest our food, much of what we eat gets turned into sugar, all right? Not all of it, but much of what we eat gets turned into sugar. As our blood sugar goes up, our insulin level goes up, right? Because the insulin says, woohoo, I've got some sugar I've got to take care of. So your pancreas creates the insulin. The insulin comes to the door of the cell and it says, knock, knock, knock. You know, I've got some guests for you. The cell opens up. The sugar goes into the cell where it can be burned for energy. Now we've got high insulin levels because the insulin is roaming around trying to find cells that it can cram the sugar into. For a while it can, but after a while the pancreas begins to wear out. Its ability to be able to do its job diminishes. And after a while we end up with diabetes, and after a while we end up taking insulin because our pancreas can no longer produce the insulin that we need, so we have to take the shot. I actually prefer the hemoglobin A1C test than a fasting glucose test because anybody, my dad was a diabetic and he was so naughty. When it was time for him to go to the doctor, like for 2 days before going to the doctor to have his blood work drawn, he was perfect. You know, he would eat the perfect diet, he would do the perfect thing, and he would go in and he would get good numbers, right? He was. Because when we check your glucose level, it's like taking a snapshot, okay? Well, today I'm wearing pink. So if you took a snapshot of me, I'm wearing pink. Well, tomorrow I might be wearing red or green or purple or blue, right? All you know about that snapshot of me was that in that moment in time, I had short hair and a pink shirt. 3 months from now, I may have been eating ice cream every day. I may be a little more pudgy, and I may have grown my hair out and be wearing blue. I look very different, right? When we check your A1C, we are looking at the cell. We're not checking how much sugar is in your blood vessel. We're looking at how much sugar has been in your cell. Your germ is the powerhouse of your grain, okay? The germ is where all of the antioxidants are found, the B vitamins, the enzymes. That's the nutritional powerhouse of your grain, is the germ, okay? The outside is the bran. That's the fiber, all right? The inside, the endosperm, that's that white fluffy stuff. So if you think about this as being a grain of wheat, we began to process our grains, 150 years ago or so. We put them on hot rollers and we'd roll it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The first thing that would float away is the germ. Back and forth, back and forth. The second thing that floats away is the bran. And so we're left with this white fluffy stuff. And what do we call that? Flour. Yep, we call it flour. Now, back then, children started getting B vitamin deficiencies, diseases like beriberi and some of these things that we don't hear about now. And the reason we don't hear about it is because our government required the manufacturers to chemically add back in 5 different B vitamins. They would, add these back to the flour. They stripped it away and then they're going to add it back in. And what do we call that? Enriched flour. So they've stripped away more than 20, and in some grains, more than 85 different God-given wonderful things. They've chemically added back in 4 or 5, and they've called it enriched. That would be like you saying, Cheryl, I need change for a 20. Oh yeah, I've got change. So she gives me her $20 bill, and I give her 4 ones back. And I'd call her enriched. Is she enriched? No, she just got ripped off, right? Totally ripped off. Well, that's what's happening with our grains today, okay? We're getting totally ripped off because all of the nutritional value is being stripped away, and we're left with this white fluffy stuff, the flour. The problem is that enriched flour has absolutely no fiber in it. And the fiber helps us in several different ways. One, it binds to cholesterol and helps us to get rid of the cholesterol. Another thing that it does is it helps us to control our weight. Now, it helps us to control our weight a couple of different ways. One, when we eat foods that have fiber in them, those foods tend to be a little more bulky, all right? So it takes up space in our stomach, right? And we're just not eating as much of the garbage because there's more space taken up by fiber-rich foods. But it also helps to control our blood sugar. And this is how that happens. So let's say it's early in the morning. Life is crazy. I've got to get to the office. I've got to get the girls to their music lessons. The dog pooped on the floor. Grandma needed something. It was just crazy. And I did not have time for breakfast. So I grabbed a glass of apple juice and a white bagel, and out the door I flew. Now, does that apple juice have any fiber in it? No. Does that white bagel have any fiber in it? No. So when I drink that sugar is getting absorbed right here. It doesn't even have to wait till it gets to my stomach, right? That sugar is getting quickly absorbed. I eat the white bagel. That's turned into sugar real quick, right? My pancreas starts to produce that insulin, and my blood sugar goes right up, okay? Well, as my blood sugar goes up, so does my insulin level. My insulin does its job, and it brings my blood sugar down. Does that make sense? Okay? Did its job. Maybe this is 7 o'clock. Well, this is only 9:30. I am hungry because at this line right here, my blood sugar is down and I am hungry. I'm in the office and I'm looking for something that got left over from yesterday, a pan of brownies, some crackers. I'm on the hunt for something. I find donuts because everybody brings donuts to offices, right? So I eat something again, and what does my blood sugar do? It goes back up. And I end up with this seesaw, yo-yo, it looks like a sawtooth all day long. Versus, same scenario. Crazy morning, anything that could go wrong went wrong. I'm hungry, but I don't have time to make breakfast. So I grab an apple, and I grab a slice of, we'll say it's still a bagel, true multigrain bagel, and maybe I'll take a minute to slather on some almond butter, and out the door I go. Does that apple have fiber in it? Yes. Does that true, if it's truly 100% whole grain, multi-grain bagel, is that going to have some fiber in it?
Yeah.
Yes. And the almond butter, that protein, is then going to even further slow down how fast that sugar hits my system. So I'm still eating something, but I'm eating the fruit instead of drinking the juice. There's a difference. Think of your juice as dessert, because that's what it is pure sugar. So I'm eating, and my blood sugar is absolutely going to go up. And my pancreas is going to kick in, and it's going to do its thing. And my blood sugar is going to go down. Do you see a difference? Yeah, so this is probably, let's see, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is probably about 12:30. All right? Think about this. Look at the spike of blood sugar that my body didn't have to deal with. Look at the spike of blood sugar that my pancreas didn't have to deal with. It saved my pancreas from having to work so hard, right? So it's not overtired. It saved my pancreas from having to produce so much insulin, because what is insulin? It's a growth hormone, all right? So fiber helps us to control our blood sugar by helping to keep our insulin levels more regulated. Does that make sense? Okay. A fiber also helps us to decrease our risk of colon cancer. Our colons were created with these little finger-like things in them, the soft little delicate tissues, and the purpose of those tissues are to absorb water, and I'm so glad it does, because if it didn't absorb water, we'd have diarrhea every day. Well, that's gross, right? So it absorbs water, and our stool, our body was meant to digest its food and, send things on out the back door. From the time you eat food until the time you excrete it, it should be about 24 to 36 hours at the most. The average American today is 3 to 5 days. We are constipated as a country, okay? And some people will say, oh, but Sheryl, I have a bowel movement every day. Great, that's good. Are you pooping out the food you ate yesterday or the food you ate 3 days ago? Well, I don't know. Well, I don't know either. Test it and find out. Well, how do you test it? Eat some beets, because what happens when you eat beets? Things turn red, right? If you don't like beets, eat some corn and don't chew a few of the kernels very well. You'll see it. Or take a charcoal capsule, whatever. Check your transit time. See what your transit time is, because the more fiber you eat, the quicker it's going to go through your system. Because in your colon, as these delicate, beautiful little tissues absorb the water, if we don't have enough fiber on board and all that waste and toxic matter is just sitting around in there doing nothing, this delicate tissues are absorbed, are being exposed to things it was never designed to be exposed to for long periods of time, right? When I lived in China, I moved there not speaking Mandarin. I was like a bull in a china shop. I couldn't speak the language. Well, clearly I'm not going to go hungry for long. So I learned some words real quick. And I would go to the market, and I discovered apples in China. I thought I knew what an apple was. Everybody knows what an apple is in America, right? I had never had apples or peaches or any of these fruits, because I was teaching at the agricultural university, and they had these fruit that would just blow your mind good, and varieties there that we didn't have here. So I would buy apples, by these ginormous, they buy them by the kilo there, these huge bags of apples. And they would ask me, how many children do you have? I'm like, oh, it's just me, you eat all these apples? Yeah, I do. I can tell you my transit time was cooking, because I didn't know how to eat anything else for the first couple weeks, it was apples, because I knew how to say that. I've forgotten now. But at the time, I ate a tremendous amount of apples. A lot of fiber in that. You know, I eventually learned to buy other things, and it was good. But I ate the apple. I didn't drink the apple juice. Okay? Always, always, always think of your juice as a dessert and treat it as such. So when you're eating, you want lots of fiber on your plate. Where do you get fiber? Whole foods, eaten whole, right? So you're eating your apple. You're not drinking the apple juice. You're eating grains and vegetables and fruits, all of those kinds of things. They're going to have fiber in them. You're not going to get fiber with white flour or juice or animal products. There's no fiber there, right? Some people, you know, there's a diet craze right now. I won't mention the name, but you all know what it is, where there's no carbohydrate. It's just all fat and a little meat. Well, these people have to take supplements because they're not getting enough fiber. They are like severely constipated. I had a friend who chose to go on this diet for a while. She ended up in the hospital because she wasn't eating enough fiber to get stuff through her colon, you know. So know that fiber is your friend. It really, really is. And you're going to get that right out of your garden, all right? Grow what you can. And if you can't grow it, then buy that at the grocery store because that's what's going to be helpful to you. I'm going to shut up now. Yes, ma'am. Yes, you don't want your cholesterol too low. That number, I remember when I was in college, my cholesterol was 70. And my doctor was concerned about that. In fact, they tested me for cancer because of it. I was fine. But generally speaking, you want your cholesterol over 100. And let me go back to the blood sugar. I told you wanted it below 100. If your blood sugar is currently over 100, then by all means, please try to get it below 100 and sustain that. Your next goal would be to get it below 90, okay? Because for every point above 90 you go, there's incremental increase in risk in diabetes, okay? Any other questions? I know it's getting late. Yes, ma'am. Is there such a thing as eating too much fiber? Probably, but it would be really hard to do. Like it would be really hard to do because fibrous foods are so bulky. They take up so much room in your stomach that you're going to go through them. One final thing on this here. We tend to graze in this country. We think we're sheep. So we graze all day long, right? Your mama told you to eat 3 square meals a day, okay? Few of us actually do it. If we eat 2 to 3 times a day, regular times every day, if we're eating the way we shouldn't feel like we need to snack, all right? If you wake up in the morning and you're not hungry, there's a problem. And more often than not, it's twofold. One, we're shoving stuff into our system all day such that our body never really has a chance to complete the digestive process. From the minute you start eating, the digestion begins. It takes 4 to 6 hours for the digestive process to finish. And if we interrupt that process, it kind of has to stop and start all over again. It's not able to do that because the digestive process has been started and stopped all day long, so that when we go to bed, we may be asleep, but our body is working really hard to digest the food that we've been putting in it all day. So we wake up in the morning, you know, we'd rather hit the snooze button 10 times than actually get out of bed and feel energetic. How many of you wake up in the morning just rip, snorting, ready to go? Few of us. Okay, now some of that may be because you're staying up too late, you're watching television, or you're, you know, doing your whatever on your device. Okay, go to bed. You'll feel better in the morning. But the other issue is often diet related, timing in terms of when we're eating our food. So make sure that you're eating your food at regular intervals, even on the weekend. Go to bed, get up. At times, our body is based on circadian rhythms. Our body is rhythm-based. And that's not just in terms of light and dark. sleep and awake, but also in terms of eating at regular times. So it's not just what you're eating, it's also when you're eating it. And sometimes it's what's eating you, right? In terms of what's going on here. That's another thing that will increase your cholesterol, is stress. You could be exercising, you could be eating the perfect diet, but if you are stressed out, your body will produce more cholesterol than it normally